Hi guys, we're continuing with chapter 2 today, and today we're going to be looking at how elements can combine together to form compounds. So if you recall, the last time we talked, we were looking at single individual atoms, and we were talking about a standard neutral atom versus an isotope versus an ion, and how an ion can become a cation, which remember is positive because cats have paws and they have lost electrons. Or we can have anions, and anions are negative. They've gained electrons. Remember, electrons are negative, so gain electrons get negative. So that was sort of a wrap-up of what the main points from yesterday's lesson were. And now we're going to be kind of stepping on into combining these elements in order to form compounds. So atoms with unpaired electrons in their valence shell, or without 8 electrons in their valence shell, are going to want to interact with other atoms. They're going to tend to donate, accept, or share electrons in order to eliminate vacancies. We have already talked about donating and accepting electrons. So remember the case of sodium. So remember we have sodium here, and sodium has an electron to donate. And remember, sodium's going to want to donate that electron, and it's going to lose an electron, so it's going to become positive, so it's going to become the cation, Na+. And also remember that other atoms want to accept or get electrons in order to fill their valence shell. Yesterday we looked at fluorine, but today we're going to look at chlorine. Chlorine has 17 protons, neutrons, and electrons. So when I say that chlorine has 17, that means that we have 2 in our inner shell, and then 8 more for 10, and then 7 more on the outside, which means it has almost those full 8, those full octet that it wants in order to be happy. So chlorine is going to want to accept an electron over here. So chlorine wants to accept that electron, and it wants to be able to form Cl-. And this is the foundation of forming ionic bonds. So if you look down here, it says that an ionic bond forms from transferred electrons. And we'll look at that again in just a second. Covalent bonds, on the other hand, form from shared electrons. In this case, both groups want to accept an electron. In the case of a covalent bond, both of the atoms want to accept an electron. And we're going to be looking at that one. That's the share concept. We're going to be looking at that along with hydrogen and van der Waals in more details in just a minute. But for the moment, we're going to stay the course with ionic bonds. So an ionic bond requires a complete transfer of this electron over to a new atom, making one atom that gets rid of all of this whole row, and it makes this sodium positive. And it makes this chlorine negative. And then what happens is the positives and the negatives start to attract. Opposites attract. And so we start to see this kind of sticking together like magnets in order to make an ionic bond. Now here is something that is kind of interesting, definitely important for you to know. According to chemistry, ionic bonds are the strongest bond. When you have this complete transfer and you get this full positive attached to this full negative, boom, they stick together and they stay together. But the only kryptonite, the only thing that just so easily breaks apart ionic bonds is water. And in biology, we are in water. All organisms, all life, all Earth is full of water. Water completely dissolves and breaks apart ionic bonds super, super easily. So when we talk in biology, we say that covalent bonds are the strongest bonds. But as soon as you take chemistry, they're going to say ionic bonds are the strongest bonds. And so what I want you to know is that the strength is relative. If we're going to say they are so strong, that's because ionic bonds have to be dry. If they are in water, they become very weak and very easily dissolved. We're now going to move on to covalent bonds. So to understand covalent bonds, we're going to start by looking at two chlorine molecules. And I'm still drawing the whole kernel for you guys. What you're going to notice is that in these pictures, they're not drawing the whole kernel. They're not drawing all of these interiors. They're only drawing this furthest out one, which we call the valence shell. And that's kind of a chemistry thing, but it's going to help your biology as well. It has the 17 valence electrons, and so it has an opening in its valence shell right here. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so it has like a space. And we have another chlorine over here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in its valence shell, so it has a space over here. And so we often hear this described as sharing, but I have to tell you that this kind of sharing is very much like my children sharing. I have 3 kids. I have 2 daughters. And when the 2 older ones were younger, Charlotte, she's the middle one, she's just like totally crazy. She's hilarious. But so what Charlotte does, from the time that she was very little, is let's say there was a Barbie, okay? This is actually like a real story from my real life. Okay, there was a Barbie. And what happened was Charlotte and Aubrey both wanted the Barbie. Aubrey is older. She's 3 years older. She's much bigger. So Charlotte has the Barbie, but it's Aubrey's Barbie. She got it for her birthday. It's very special to her. That's what they say. And so Aubrey goes over and she grabs the Barbie from Charlotte and she pulls it out of her hand. And she says, "This is mine. Okay, this is my Barbie. It's special to me." And Charlotte is much younger. At the time, Charlotte was like 18 months old or 2 years old. She was pretty little. And she's always been very slight. Like she's like a pretty light little kid, but she's scrappy. Though she be but little, she is fierce. That's my Charlotte. Okay, so Charlotte comes running back at Aubrey and she reaches up for Aubrey and she grabs onto the Barbie and she like puts her arm like through, like if Aubrey's holding it, she puts her arm through so that she has her wrist around the Barbie and she grabs it like this and then she lifts her feet up into the air and so that she falls onto the ground, right? Sacrificing her body. She throws her body up into the air. She rips the Barbie out of Aubrey's hands. She falls onto the ground, rolls over. She has the Barbie now. She gets up and she starts running, okay? And Aubrey goes running after her, trying to get the Barbie. And this is what I want you to picture whenever your science teacher says that chlorine is going to share another electron with chlorine. They do not want to share. This is not an agreement that they have reached. Really what it means is that this chlorine looks over here and it spies this electron. And so it reaches out and it tries to grab it. And this chlorine over here sees this electron, and so it reaches out and tries to grab it. And so what ends up happening is that these 2 electrons, neither one's strong enough to fully win the electron. These 2 chlorines end up locked in an epic battle, like Aubrey versus Charlotte for the Barbie, an epic battle. It's not sharing. It's a fight to the death. It is a grudge match for that electron, where neither one is actually strong enough to get it. And so we term it this nice covalent bond, where they share electrons. Okay, they're sharing. Really picture grudge match, fight to the death, trying to get those electrons.